The modern healthcare system won't help you heal.
It's designed to keep you sick and dependent on drugs.
If you want to get well, you got to get out of the system.
You found Predictive Health Clinic.
Join us as we get well and stay healthy.
Hey, welcome back, folks. This is the Predictive Health Clinic podcast. I'm your host, Jack Heald, and this is a continuing conversation with Dr. Kedrick Pickering, who has been a guest before. We're actually recording this back to back with the previous episode, although it won't be released that way. Dr. Pickering, you were talking about a moment in the delivery. I'm assuming this is a delivery room?
Operating room.
The operating room.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a patient who's bleeding to death, and everybody in the room is exhausted. You've done everything you can do. And there's a moment where you just realize, how did you say it? You utter a quiet prayer and say, if I need help. I can't remember exactly how you said it, but
you look to the skies in your own mind and you say, if you are dead, whatever you call it, God Almighty, whatever terminology, but God, if you're there, I need you, because if you don't show up right now, I'm hopeless.
You suppose it's necessary for a human being to get into that situation where they realize all hope is gone without outside intervention, divine intervention, for them to experience that transformation?
It's, to me, it's a deeply personal thing, but generally speaking, if we can do things on our own, we don't look for help in whatever sphere of life it is. If you are good at your own finances, you don't need a financial advisor. I mean, if you could reach into your medicine cabinet and take out something for an ailment, you don't need a doctor. So generally, we seek help when we are beyond our own ability and our capability. And I think the same thing generally applies in our spiritual life. When we get to the end of ourselves, so to speak, and we really can't see anywhere forward. I mean, sometimes in your mind's eye, everything is dark. There's no light shining, so you don't know where to turn. The question, is intimately involved in us losing ourselves, so to speak, because we just don't have the ability to do what we need to get done.
Yeah. Why did you pick that particular title, Walk in Faith and Medicine?
So good question. I didn't. Title evolved, because I wasn't particularly trying to write a book on that particular subject. I was doing a basic course in understanding the intimate details of writing and learning to write. And it was my coach who said to me, but I have discovered that you're a man of faith, deep faith. Have you ever considered writing a book on faith? And I said, no, because that sounded so religious to me. I didn't want to write anything religious and, all that Christian stuff. That wasn't what I was about. I wanted to just learn. And then she suggested that, why don't you consider, writing about your faith, writing from your journals? And then that's when the transition took place. So instead of talking about a chapter, let's call it a journal 1, journal 2, journal 3, and write from your journals, your experiences, Let's look at pain. Let's look at joy. Let's look at sorrow. Let's look at success. Let's look at failure, all of the varied emotions, and just tell the story.
Was there a common theme that you saw as you looked back?
Yeah, and that's where the title evolved, because you realize that, I mean, one of the experiences that I wrote about entitled My Worst Nightmare. It's over 30 odd years ago, and it still is my worst nightmare. It was a story about one of my patients, her first pregnancy, normal labor. Everything went perfectly normal. The monitoring was normal, just excited and waiting for the delivery. And heart rate was well. 2 pushes later, the baby comes out and the baby's dead, stillborn.
Oh,
Call it my worst nightmare. And I write about how difficult not only it was for me as a physician, but I describe myself as being the leader of the orchestra. And I have to direct traffic, so to speak, because I have my patient to contend with, I have my husband to contend with. But I have to guide the nurses through this difficult time, I have to guide the whole staff through this difficult time, because it was, and to this day, I still don't have an explanation for what went wrong, because everything seemed so normal. And so I delve into all the different and difficult emotions that we as the staff go through and win through, and oftentimes have to deal with that other people don't necessarily recognize or understand or even appreciate. So I call it my worst nightmare.
that's got to be something that, as a physician, that really everyone in the healthcare field faces on a much more frequent basis than those of us just out and doing the normal thing that most normal people do, dealing with these unexplained losses. And I suspect that an awful lot of healthcare providers deal with it by growing harder. Why do you suppose you didn't?
And so the question that you asked earlier, why did I choose that particular topic for the book, A Walk in Faith in Medicine? And I said to you that the topic evolved, because in reflection and in retrospect, the only way that I could cope, because I was in truth and in fact the leader of the orchestra. And I attended a leadership seminar several years ago in a presentation in which the presenter said that if you're going to lead, you have to first turn your back to the crowd. And that's what the conductor does. The conductor focuses on the orchestra, but his back is to the crowd. And so I delved into having to basically keep focus, because that baby didn't survive, but there are other babies coming. There are other patients to look up for. You can't fall into molasses and the work stopped. But everybody else has their own emotions to deal with. And so they're looking at me in that context. I still have to keep directing the orchestra, keep directing the music to keep the chorus going. And so when you ask about the title for the book, in retrospect, that's the core of it. The only way I was able to come through that is that, there was divine intervention. And that's what I think people refer to as faith. And don't ask me to explain faith, because I don't think I can. I can only tell you that, I had these experiences and I can't find any other explanation except to say that there was that unseen hand. In some aspects of the book, I refer to it as the man from Galilee.
Was coming to that, and I'm not at all uncomfortable using the term faith to describe that, was coming to that kind of faith something that was a result of your work, or did you bring that faith into your work?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they're one and the same. I think that, growing up in the way I grew up, and I deal with that in the book. I grew up in the church, and I grew up in a small community where your life was church. There wasn't anything else. I grew up on an island in a small community, so there was an exposure there. But in the context of the book, these types of experiences, the caption on the bottom part of the book, there says, an obstetrician's innermost thoughts on spirituality and moral dilemmas in life and death situations. That's the caption on the bottom part of the book. So those experiences and being exposed to, it doesn't get any more real than life and death.
Yeah.
This ain't a high school picnic. This ain't a playground game. This is the real deal. And it is. You can't make up stories because it's as real as it gets. Life and death. And 1 minute it is life, and the other minute it's death. And you can't walk away from that. It is a part of what you are, who you are, and what is going to be as time evolves. It's, the question about whether it was faith that you brought into it or faith that evolved. I think they're one and the same. I don't think they're separate at all.
You perceive, let me reframe the question. Dealing with life and death on as frequently as you do is going to alter any human being. How do you see that you perceive the world differently as a result of that than most people do? How has it changed you as a human to deal with these things so frequently, or at least frequently compared to the rest of us?
I don't take too much for granted. And I own self, my own person, at the very core of who I am, I think I have a sense of understanding of my own mortality. And therefore, I don't take too much of anything for granted. I recognize and appreciate the ups and the downs. As my son reminded me one time, the ebbs and flows of life. I understand and appreciate those things. And Jack, you might appreciate this. And because I live on an island in the Caribbean where I see the sunrise and the sunset, I see the sea and I see the beach and I see the beauty of it all. I have learned to appreciate that for what it is, and I don't take that for granted. And so that sense of appreciation that there's a limit to the time that we have, I think has helped me in my professional work and in my day-to-day dealing with individuals. I think I've become a much more compassionate person. I can be real empathetic in difficult situations. And I'll say this just to help emphasize the point. I do not practice abortions. But every time a patient comes seeking to me because of the profession that I'm in, seeking an abortion, I still have to be compassionate towards them and not be just judgmental, not to try and make them feel like, they're a criminal or anything. And that in itself has taught me so much more about life and my own failings and weaknesses and shortcomings as a human being, and have given me a different perspective in terms of showing compassion where it may not otherwise have been possible to do that. So that's how I'd say it has changed me as a person in this context.
I'm struck by your description of living on an island, of being able to observe the sunrise, the sunset, the beach, and it's linked to gratitude. I think in the final analysis, people are drawn to a podcast such as this one because they want a better life. It really boils down to that. Nobody listens to a health podcast like this to get information that'll help them make more money. or help them find a girlfriend or boyfriend. They want a better life. And I think it's profoundly true that finding a way to be grateful, to have gratitude in your heart for where you are, what you're experiencing is, if not the first step, at least an important step on the road to having a better life. Just simply having a better life. I've always been struck by there's a passage in the New Testament where the writer says, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God." It always struck me that it didn't say be thankful. It didn't, or feel thankful. It said give thanks. And there's been times in my life when I have not remotely felt thankful, certainly didn't think I was full of gratitude, but just kind of as an exercise of of discipline, I chose to give thanks. I don't feel it, but I'm going to express gratitude anyway. One of the things that always amazes me every time I do this is that giving thanks seems to create gratitude. I don't understand how that works.
Let me share a quick anecdote with you, Jack. I have one sister, and up until last year, I had one brother. There's three of us. My brother is 4 years younger than I am. He died suddenly in London in August last year. He just had a massive heart attack. And as painful as it was and still is, I found a way to be thankful because I had the financial wherewithal to be able to bring my brother's body back home and not let his children have to bear the burden of responsibility of doing all of that. And I just let them do the planning and I took care of all the other responsibilities. And I was grateful that I had the opportunity and the ability and the wherewithal to make sure that my brother was well taken care of. And even in the fact that I lost my brother, I found a way to be grateful for the circumstances that had occurred. So I share that perspective that, in everything, give thanks. And I'll just share this with you also. I learned, some time ago, another passage that you can refer to in the writings of Paul, in which it is written this way, not necessarily in the original way. It says, contentment and godliness are great gain. And so I think for us as human beings, if we can learn to be content with whatever we have, even though we strive to do better, it is the foundational aspect of getting to that higher plane that we all are striving to get to, wherever that is. I don't know where it is, but wherever it is.
I have a group of men that I gather with regularly. And the reason we gather is because we've all been aware that who we are and who we have the possibility to be are not the same person. And we meet together to try to encourage one another and help one another to close that gap between our potential and where we are right now. And I think ultimately that's a lot of what this is about. How do we close that gap between what we know is possible and what we're currently experiencing? All right. Well, I appreciate you taking a little extra time with us, Dr. Pickering. The book is Walk in Faith and Medicine, Dr. Kedrick Pickering. I trust we can get this everywhere that books are sold.
I hope so.
All right. We'll make sure that there are links in the show notes. Thanks for joining us. This has been a bonus edition of the Predictive Health Clinic. We'll talk later.
Are you a healthcare practitioner, eager to escape the grind of corporate medicine?
Are you ready to make a massive difference in your world? Listen up.
We are the Wizard of Ads.
For 40 years, we've created dominant brands in a variety of industries.
Now, we're bringing our magic to healthcare.
We're seeking one extraordinary healthcare practitioner to help us build the first national brand in direct primary care.
If you think you could be that person, let's talk.
Email us at health@wizardofads.com.
Tell us why you think you're the one.
That's health@wizardofads.com.